what I tell you now won't be new to you, that, you know, we're in a city. Here's a cathedral. We're in the heart of a city that what used to be predominantly wetland, you know, kikatea forest and the like. It's a forested, wet place. And, you know, the 1850 map shows it well. So here we are in the centre, and we've got our wetlands, these Beeley Avenue across here. So we've got this wetland right down into the Peterborough Village area. And when in 1995 we did the project for the community boards around the city, and we mapped the lands of the city to map the natural biota of Christchurch, what was the nature of the city. And here we have, you can see this map, there's the Haheri mid-age plains, this dry land that flows down with the Avon because the Waimakariri is to regularly overtop, and it would have flowed down here and deposited gravels down there. And we see that today when people are doing their geotech testing and the gravels along that route. And then we have the Totara forest band here, kikatea forest, you know, swamp forest and peat. Now that was just from that broad mapping that we did back in 95, but it gives you an idea of the nature of the land here and what we're trying to deal with now, because that's the sort of territory it was naturally. And when they built the convention centre, and I walked along Peterborough Street in there, they excavated just 2 or 3 metres down, and there was this mass of totara stumps, all totara stumps there in the water and under that site. So it was you can see it's an old forested land, and they were smashed stumps, possibly smashed by a flood from the Waimakariri. So it was a forested land, but a lot of people have forgotten that it was a wetland and a forested land, but we've been rather reminded of that recently. And also that the coastline moved. So the coastline did come right in here into Hagley Park. You know, 6,500 years ago, the Canterbury Bight, the Pegasus Bay was right into here, and it's gradually gone out. So, you know, 5,000 years ago, the coastline was at our village. We could have had a beachfront section. And people would have seen this map, the 1850 map that laid out the grid of the city, Cathedral Square and the diagonals, and they mapped in where the waterways were. I obviously tried to avoid them with the major streets, but you can see in our area there's a concentration of streams, and many of you know that, some of you I've talked to remember the streams flowing in there through the yards or around St Luke's or wherever when they were younger. But decades ago they were piped away. So from this they were piped to this. So the waters have gone from flowing through those places. They've been piped away. However, that's just one pattern in our history, and just like this of the Mississippi through New Orleans, which would have, you know, the meanders of the system would have varied through time. Someone's mapped it through time there. Sadly, we don't have that for the Avon, but we have these meanders that will have varied through time. So although we've got the 1850 map of the stream pattern, that's not the only pattern there would have been. There would have been a lot of different patterns of river meanders. And if you look at the LiDAR, this photo of the land of the city, you can see that even here's the river here, but you can see there would have been old patterns, probably an old meander here, another pattern here. So it would have changed through time. And so there's deposits from those different eras. And people know that there's flood mapping through the area, so that This is along the Avon. There's that mapped area where of the floodplain that's floodable area that's now recognised in the city plan that you've got to recognise in any rebuilding. So we've got an area of a lot of, because this part of the plains, the waters are rising to come up to meet sea level. We've got a lot of springs emerging, and a lot of people have wells. People tell me about their artesian wells they used to have, and it was great. The waterways, we reopened these springs and flowing from Barbados, Salisbury corner there, back into the Avon. And so, it's all a recognition of that, but the water table is just a metre below the surface, and the waters are right there. And we know, and we all saw, the levees along the Avon erupted and are pretty bad in a lot of our village area. The river bank, the natural bank, the levee, not the levee like they're talking about in the Mississippi. So the natural embankment to the river, that erupted, and you all will have seen those great breaks in it. But it's not just the levees to the Avon that erupted, and people will have seen that in all the old stream pattern from the Avon 1850 map, where those lines crossed the old levees from those streams. Even though the waters have been piped away, the levees from those, the land cracked. And that pattern was quite visible right through Salisbury, through Manchester, through Peterborough. It's all been visible. Now, 6 months ago, we were involved in the 48-hour design competition, and we looked at the site there and recognised there was an old stream through. This was the Orion site. We're just recognising the nature of that land in our design for that, and that's what we're trying to encourage today, is a recognition of the nature of the place and the culture of the place. So we looked at recognising the old wetlands and the streams of the land into the design for new buildings there, and in the structure we did for the Orion site, the whole site redevelopment. So again, we're saying, don't forget the nature of this land, and we need to learn to work with it. That's the map of the Tonkin and Taylor of this, the observed land damage map, and as you might have noticed on the Peterborough Village website, we've said we don't, as locals, what we have observed is quite different than what they've observed, and I'd welcome people coming and telling me about their contrary observations to that map. So a wee bit of an argument. And what we're dealing with in our village, this difficult land, it's the residential area is classified as TC3, green-blue zoning, so that you have to look at the character of the land for any rebuild. But TC3 isn't just a problem for us, it's also a problem in a lot of the city. So whilst we're a microcosm of the problem, and it's a much bigger problem than just in our area, but we do have quite difficult land. And in our workshop today, people they looked at the geotech reports we've got for these various sites, for the Cafe Valentino site, for the Briscoe site up in Salisbury Street, for the Repertory Theatre site in Kilmore, and the Tringrove one here in Manchester Street. And people had those geotech reports as well as a lot of others. We were lucky to have about 10 geotech experts here today, and they had a lot of knowledge and information, and it's able to inform us much better. About, sorry, do I get rid of that, Mark? Escape, that's a good idea. And there's the Tringrove one. So we got difficult land, but what we've been talking about today, there's some great opportunities for working with that land. And just as in the land upon which Venice has been built, their land, they've they've built actually in timber piles into water, and they put stone buildings on top. Now, I don't think we're going to do that, but you know, they took up a challenge, didn't they? They took a real challenge. I mean, it's incredible, really, but perhaps they don't have quite the seismic challenge that we do. And then you look at New York, and you look at what New York was and what New York is. And in these lands, it's not just here that there's challenges in the land. And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to look at doing things differently and to respond to it. And just this is a building that Martin, who's here, one of our locals, just been in Petra. And this is a building there, where thousands year old, 3 major earthquakes, 2.3 thousand years, but they used timber into the structure that has enabled that to survive where everything else hasn't. So wooden rollers, yes. So we can be innovative here, and we've got a real opportunity, and we've got some wonderful expertise in Christchurch and around the rest of New Zealand, and we've been so lucky to be able to access that. And so I'd like to hand over to Andy Buchanan, who's the Professor of Civil Engineering at Canterbury University, and he's going to address you. Now, we're not going to present the geotech experts are not presenting tonight, but they're happy to come, and we'll have another session purely on the geotechnical dimensions some other evening, because there's a lot of stuff to address. We've had a big day, and so we're going to look at the construction options primarily this evening.